folks. This is Maggie Rose, and this is 2:03. This is 1400 Pacific Standard Time on April the 13th, 2016, and we are coming to you live. This is Maggie Rose, live with the new Concord Hour on the Micro Effect Radio Broadcasting Network. I don't know if Donna Hammond is with us or not. I tried to call her in on Skype again today and was unable to get a response, so she might end up coming and joining with us a little bit later. I am coming to you from California, folks. I am down here on family business right now, taking care of some things, and we also are having sort of a mini family reunion. We're not going to have everybody here, but we're going to have most of my family. I have a brother coming up from Los Angeles, another brother from the Petaluma Roundup Park area. I have one brother flying in from Hawaii. I have a son who's flying in from Hawaii, and some others that are coming down from outside the state of California. And my husband and my youngest will be joining me here real soon, too. It's my mother's birthday on Friday, April 15th. And my daughter's birthday is just a few days later, so we're sort of going to have a combined birthday party here. Family is really important to me, and I know that in our society nowadays, people are so transient and are, moving all over the place, and they don't have quite the connection with family that we used to have, and that's sad. I think that's one of the problems with this country is not only have we taken God out of the equation, in our schools, in our workplaces, in our day-to-day affairs, but we've also somehow gotten away from understanding the real importance of family. I'm not saying all of you feel that way. I'm just saying there's a great many people out there who do seem to think that family is not as important as really it could be or as it should be. And so, anyway, I'm looking forward to this mini family reunion. At this point, my mother's going to be able to get all of her kids together in one place. A few years ago, she was in her 60s, and she adopted 3 kids overseas, one in Russia and 2 of them in the Ukraine. And that adoption ended up proving to be a very interesting experience. I mean, from what I'm understanding, when you end up having children that you adopt overseas, you find that there's a whole new set of experiences and situations that you encounter that you would not necessarily always encounter here. My youngest brother was adopted at age 1.5 in Russia, and then the twins, boy and girl, were adopted in the Ukraine, and their adoption was finalized in Poland. Many times I've been looking at the news and seeing what is happening overseas and trying to understand the dynamics, the ideologies of all these other countries. I lived myself under, as you know, from previous shows, under a dictatorship in South Korea for 13 months. And during that time, I saw a lot of injustices going on in a country that was very much westernized, had a lot of industry, a lot of advancements. The last person in my family who had been over in Korea had been in the 1950s. My biological father and my stepfather, my adoptive father, both ended up serving in Korea in the 1950s during the Korean War. It was a totally different Korea then. There were no trees left by the time the war concluded. They experienced some really heavy-duty situations. They were there during the worst of the winters. One of my fathers was at the Incheon landing. One father was in the Marine Corps. One father was in the Army. So it was really interesting to go back there in the 1970s and be reporting to them a totally different Korea than the one they left behind in 1951 or 52. I was hoping that I was going to be able to... Hello, Theocrat. Theocrat just came into the chat room. And we've got in there Valerie and Richard and Bonnie and Deputy Dog and Not Yet Dad. Not Yet Dead Yet. I would hope not. Anyway, I was really hoping we were going to be able to bring both sides... I want to back up on Skype again today. We were going to conclude with what we were discussing yesterday, and I guess Donna is still not with us. I was hoping she was going to be able to come in and join us, and she's still kind of learning how to do the Skype thing, and I know that Cy was also going to be coming in as well, and I was not able to touch bases with either one of them a little while ago. I was trying to call, and the phones just kept ringing and ringing, so they probably both had some situations they had to take care of. Both of them are still raising young children, and as you know, as my feeling is, family takes priority, so we might just have to bring them back in on another day. One of the things that I have been following, as you all know, rather closely has been the Bundy situation, and it's been very, very disconcerting to see that it seems like we're not getting as far ahead with things as we would hope. I've been receiving some wonderful emails coming from some people that have been sharing with me the updates of what is going on with the Bundys right now. As you know, we read yesterday something that came across my computer about how Mel Bundy, one of the sons of Cliven and Carol Bundy, was terribly abused by the federal government, by the BLM, by the feds, by the FBI. We knew about Davy Bundy having been terribly beat up by the BLM and or the Fish and Wildlife a couple of years ago when he was trying to take pictures with his camera to make sure that he had for the record what was going on. And they beat him up very badly in front of his family. His sister-in-law, Angie, personally reported to me what she saw. The nephews, the nieces, the grandchildren watched, their uncle being beat up by the federal government and then taken to Las Vegas and thrown on the streets like a piece of trash. And as you all know, that was all he did was take pictures. Well, here now, 2 years later, after they get done arresting Ammon and Ryan Bundy, they arrest their father, Cliven, as he's landing at the Portland airport. And then they decide to go after Mel and Davy. The first thing they did is arrested Davy in front of his wife and children. And then they went after Mel. They showed up at his work site. There was about 30 to 40 FBI dressed as construction workers. They surrounded him. They beat him up. They put him in a jail cell. He basically had to sit in his own urine, his own feces, for a long time. They didn't give him a bathroom. They finally brought him a piece of bread to eat. And then a couple days later, they brought him some food that he basically had to eat off the floor. Now, you don't do this to a dog, okay? You don't treat a dog the way that the federal government's treating our people. They're obviously trying to make lessons for us to follow, so we will, like we do at the IRS every year, so we will turn around and kowtow to all of their whims and all their wishes. They've got the full force behind them. They've got the guns. They got the manpower. They got the money. And they seem to over and over again keep getting away with these abuses and never held accountable. The federal judges are all in on it. They just basically want to be done with it. They hear a case next, go on to the next case, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes later, next, go on to the next case. They really don't care about the truth, and many times they'll tell the defendant's attorney or the defendant, oh, we're not going to hear that. We're not going to allow that evidence. Well, why not? Why not allow the evidence? If it could possibly prove that maybe we are innocent and you, the federal government, are guilty, there's going to come a time, folks, when people are going to say enough is enough. I thought with the murder and assassination of LaVoy Finnegan that would have been it. I thought with LaVoy's death that people were going to finally rise up. But, oh, no. Some people who knew the ambush was coming, they ran back to Colorado, Arizona, Arkansas, and, it looks like Donna's coming in. Just a moment. Are you there, Donna?
Yeah, I'm here.
There we go. Okay. Hi, Donna. We had some technological difficulty. I hope the people in the chat room are understanding that we were having a conversation going on here for a little while, and then all of a sudden we discovered that we were chatting all by ourselves. Sorry about that, folks. we had Valerie saying that she heard some white noise in the background, and after the white noise, then there was absolutely nothing. So we were sitting here chatting away. Let me go back to something, Donna, that I received today regarding the Bundy cattle rustling. Did you receive that over the email that I sent you?
I think so, and I'm not sure though that was that. Yeah, the one with the from Facebook originally.
Yes.
Okay.
So here we have people like the Bundys that are being physically abused, emotionally, mentally abused. This guy, Kyle Shumway, comes in, and he says, I live in southwest Utah. I grew up on a ranch less than 100 miles from the Bundy Ranch. My father knows Cliven Bundy, and I know Cliven's son, Ryan. This is not a hoax. It is an action of force by the BLM. The BLM were going to sell the cattle at one of the smallest cattle markets in Utah. No cattle markets in Nevada would take the cattle without a properly signed brand inspection, which the BLM cannot obtain without Cliven Bundy's signature. The BLM paid the owner of the Utah cattle market $300,000 to do the sale. This was by R Livestock, that's R like in Robert, Livestock Connection in Monroe, Utah, owned by one of Scott G. Robbins. Scott G. Robbins has agreed to purchase this cattle, which is illegally purchasing it. According to the Utah Business Entity Search, Utah Governor Herbert stepped in and forbid them from bringing the cattle into Utah without legally signing the required health and brand. Now, when I read that, and it says that the governor stepped in and forbid them from bringing in the cattle into Utah without the legally required health and brand inspections, which again require Bundy's signature, and that no feral, that means wild, loose cattle, are allowed to be imported at all per Utah statute, because Bundy claims ownership of maybe 350 to 500 head of branded cattle. The other 500 to 700 cattle, estimated cattle, would all be considered feral by the BLM. BLM officially backed off, but we suspect they're still secretly shipping them through Utah without any permission to do so to private buyers in Colorado. The contract cowboys that the BLM hired to do the Roundup are from Samson Livestock in Meadow, Utah. They're traders, one and all. From what I understand, Cliven Bundy owns both the water rights and the grazing rights to all of the land where his cattle run. If Bundy failed to use them, the grazing rights would revert to the BLM and would be retired, while the water rights would revert to the state of Nevada, likely then to be sold to the highest bidder, which would probably be a bidding war between the mineral companies that are behind this action with the BLM and the city of Las Vegas, which is thirsty for water and has had multiple attempts to try to buy water through eminent domain from Utah farmers and ranchers from Utah. And it was all blocked by the Utah legislature and Utah Governor Herbert. Chances are the BLM has already filed a claim on the water rights so that they can sell it to the highest bidder instead of the state. And they're trying to get the cattle off to show that Bundy cannot use the water beneficially, much like what the U.S. Forest Service and the BLM both tried to do. You know, Donna,
You're right. It's absolutely criminal, and they should be held accountable. And, you know, like I started to say while we were chatting by ourselves, you know, I have a hard time believing that there aren't some good men that do work for these agencies, but at some point, I don't know what they hold over their heads, maybe just their jobs, if they don't continue to carry out the evil that they must know they're doing what they're doing is wrong. They have to know it. We all have a conscience, and they have to know that what they're doing is wrong. Somehow they justify it with the "I'm just doing my job" crap. But somehow they think they'll be protected because they went along with it. But history always shows that the evil designers behind all this don't want anybody to get, you know, too mouthy or loose-lipped. And they'll just terminate them somehow without any connection. I mean, these people who will allow themselves to be part and parcel to this evil will have evil heaped upon them as well. They won't get away with this kind of stuff. It may be, years down the road, but this kind of stuff is...
Well, I'm reading this here what this guy wrote. He said, the BLM's actions are not only flatly illegal, they're unlawful. And not only unlawful, they are so unlawful that it took bribing someone with a $300,000 payoff to get them to accept the stolen cattle from a government agency. I do not think that could be topped anywhere else in the world other than with something like a Mexican drug cartel. So he's right. He's comparing the BLM with the Mexican drug cartel, and I agree with him. He then says, so we have a clear-cut case of unlawful and prosecutable actions by the BLM in this case. The real goal is to shut down public access to these lands. Obviously, Clive Bundy was not a jerk, and he let people go back there to explore. I myself have done a lot of backcountry exploring, and I noticed in the early 2000s that they closed down all the back roads about a half mile before the destination they used to go to discourage people from exploring the wilderness. Rather than you had to get out and walk a considerable distance to scenes such as Swazi's Leap, Paul Bunyan's Woodpile, and practically anywhere else you would want to go out four-wheeling. And in the desert sun, that long of a walk was usually tough to do. This resulted in these types of locations no longer being visited, which effectively equaled a shutdown. 3, the motives are for profit. Rather than manage the lands responsibly, the BLM is stealing it from its rightful holders via corrupt actions and legal loopholes and selling it off to corporate interests. This is a cold, hard proof that America is not a democracy, or more importantly, a republic. It is
more importantly, not a republic.
Yes, or more importantly, not a republic. It is, in fact, a fascist dictatorship where corruption rules and rights and freedom and honor are irrelevant. The BLM killed hundreds of desert tortoises on purpose. Again, the BLM killed hundreds of desert tortoises on purpose. They say they had to kill them because they did not have the funds to care for them. Here are 2 really good solutions to that problem. Just take them out in the desert and turn them loose, or 2, they could have taken the $3 million they said the Bundy raid will cost them. They could have called off the raid and saved the turtles, and with that $3 million, if they had $3 million to destroy Bundy, they also had it for the turtles as well. They did not use it for that because tyranny comes first. Steeped in arrogance and incompetence, once again, a federal agency fails to see the obvious, or perhaps they do see it, but they could care less about nature, and instead they operate as the enforcement arm of a band of high-ranking thugs. Now, we have a message here asking if we're taking callers, and the answer is yes. Let's see, Donna, we might have some people calling in. They might have a question, or they might have a comment for you. So, but that's what I don't understand, Donna. I didn't know the BLM was out there murdering tortoises because they said they couldn't take care of them. They need to be sued under the environmental.
What about the cows? They're not going to take care of those cows either. Not the way they've been. Those cows are specific to that landscape. Exactly. They will not do well elsewhere.
Exactly. Well,
they will flounder and die, or they will simply be shot like so many other of these animals in raids, where it's not about the animals, even though they come in with that sort of soft approach. But the reality is there's a fist under there, and they're there to do damage to the private owner. They simply want to reduce the resources of the private owner so that they can bully them out of their property. And one way or another, they're coming at it from multiple different angles. Whether they bankrupt them, whether they put enough pressure to make them crazy, that they just throw their hands up and say, I quit, I'm out of here. I'm done. This is too much.
Yeah. Now we have Chris.
Just take a pittance in price for the value that was there.
Exactly. Now we have Chris calling from Las Vegas. We're gonna, Chris, you got about 5 minutes to tell us what's going on?
Well, yes, I do. Thank you so very, very much, ladies. I have discovered and done quite a bit of investigations around this, as you well know. And if we look at the precept called Occam's razor, where the only thing that makes any sense is the one that's left out after you eliminate other possible solutions, we can only conclude that the federal government, which is a foreign terrorist organization, is incentivizing each of these agencies, the BLM, the Forest Service, and others, by providing bonuses, rewards, awards, payola, if you will, perhaps even a percentage of whatever is seized by these agents who are private, foreign, for-profit corporations working to line their own self-interested pockets by whatever means, which is really a license to privateer or pirate on the land, if you will, is the only thing that one can come to a conclusion of. I think we should be looking at the financial income resources of the particular agents and actors working for these so-called agencies, if we can figure out who they really are, and their relative relations, where they might hide the monies, or of course they could be deposited in foreign offshore numbered accounts to further obfuscate the payola and the bribes that they're given for stealing lands and properties, murdering tortoises, cattle, and people, as we've seen. It's the only thing that makes any sense.
I agree. I turn around and I look at, the tortoises being murdered by the BLM. I look at the cows being rounded up a couple of years ago by these cowboys hired by the BLM, taken way out in the desert. And according to the Bundys, they told me they found one or two grave sites where their cows had been murdered and butchered, and then dug a big hole, and they buried, the BLM or the federal government buried them in this big hole. There were baby cattle running all over looking for their mommies that should have still been nursing. We turn around and we look at the situation with the Bundys being abused in the jail. All of their followers are being put in the hole. They're being kept in isolation for no good reason. There's a couple people in the chat room right now that I know have a background in law enforcement. One of them has worked as a sheriff, and the other one has worked in a county jail. And, I know that they see things going on there, and if they quit because they can't put up with it anymore, then they lose their job, they lose their livelihood and income, and then if they quit, they walk away, they can't be any good to the prisoners in there. We got to have some good people in there that are able to somehow make a difference in a small way, even if it's a small way. I'm sure there's some really good jailers right now that are looking out for the Bundys. One of them, I remember saying not too long ago when I went to visit Jason Patrick, what a gentleman he was. They could not believe that, the government's trying to make all these people out to be a bunch of right-wing crazies. We've got to find some way, Chris and Donna, where we can actually I don't know if it's a class action suit, or I think it would be better if maybe, 2,000-3,000 of us across the country all filed suit against the federal government separately. Because if you do a class action suit and you lose, then everybody loses. But if every one of us filed a suit against the BLM and also against the federal government and also against all these other government agencies, we would have them so darn well tied up in the courts, which they already are now. They're going to have to say, we need to sit back and we need to look at this a little bit more closely. We are allowing this to get away from us. We are becoming the very tyrants and the dictators that we say that we're trying to get rid of in foreign countries. And we know when they went to Iraq and Afghanistan, we know now it wasn't because they thought there was weapons of mass destruction. We now know that it was about the resources that the big corporations found that they could get out of these two countries. It wasn't about mom and apple pie. It wasn't about freedom and democracy. It wasn't about winning the hearts and minds of people so we would have less terrorism around the world. No, it was about going after the resources. It doesn't look like our federal government does anything differently than what the British did. They went to India. They wanted their salt. And they took over the whole country of India and became an occupying force in India. They did this down in the islands below the United States. Everywhere we've gone, either the British or the U.S. have become occupiers. And now they're occupying our own country and turning against us because they want to take away what we have worked so hard for over the last 200 years.
Your observations are right on point. The law of conquest, these empire-building scenarios and soirees they go on, under the preposterous illusions that they're going there to protect, to save the children, or to preserve the democracy or demonocracy, the mob rule in those countries, and put up their own dictators instead of the ones that they're replacing, is a manufactured mythological illusion. It's nothing but a magic trick. And their version of taking care of the animals or the people is to remove them from the planet permanently by any means they deem to be necessary or proper or perhaps fun and entertaining. As you know, I'm a former law enforcement professional. And that was the reason I got in, is because I know there are still many, many wonderful America-loving people that work in law enforcement, in the detention facilities, even in some of the attorneys are good. Chris Hall's a pretty good one. Larry Clayman's another great one. We have some good advocates out there that actually present the interests of the people and advocate for them. However, there is another very insidious group within that group, not the good ones, but the bad apples that make them look bad, whether it's the State Department or the DOJ, makes no difference. But these people are a danger to the American way of life, and they're involved in destroying this country and the foundational republic this country is built upon, on Christian ideals. And this is what a lot of this is. It's actually a war against good versus evil. And this is, unfortunately, the truism we must deal with. This is a war for the soul and the American values that we've all believed in here for over 200 years.
Right, and like Vaughn...
Quite right. I think you're quite right. In the grand scheme of things, the ultimate war here is good and evil.
Exactly. But, you know, the thing is, at the same time, like Bonnie in the chat room, she said they're pirating our land. It's like we have pirates. I mean, they may not have a missing eye and have a sword and have a bird sitting on their shoulder, but they are pirating our land, and they're doing it with impunity. They're doing it like, they don't even blink an eye. They all seem to think that because they're being told that this is their job to do it, okay, we're going to go out and do it because we're told to do it. What bothers me is there aren't more bullshits, Donna. What do you think?
Well, yeah, it bothers me that they don't understand or that they blatantly ignore what their conscience is telling them, because everybody has a conscience. And I suppose after a while, after enough mischief, you tend to ignore your conscience, and after the integrity is gone, it's just no big deal anymore. And those people, I think in the end they are of the most miserable ever, because they are so miserable they want others to be miserable. And so they continue their evil spree, and we have to, as good people, put a stop to that. How is the question, because you can't count on the courts. They're all corrupt at this point. The federal agencies are all corrupt at this point. We all know that the employees individually, there may be some good ones in there, but they have to see the corruption. And whether they're scared just for themselves, their own personal livelihood, so they close their eyes and cover their ears and pretend not to see and hear. But at some point, they have to recognize that they're working for an evil entity, and they have to get out, or they have to come clean, or they'll be just as caught.
Well, I know that, but they don't seem to think so. Chris, didn't you find that when you were working in law enforcement that there was the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Huh. It's more ugly than good, I'm afraid. But if you remember the movie Silence of the Lambs, whenever Hannibal Lecter said to the lead character actress in there, Clarice, can't you hear the screams of the sheep when they're bleeding? This is what the American people are doing now. They're bleeding. And I hope the screams and cries of these abused, plundered, and murdered victims that are being abused ring in the heads of these people for eternity. And that's what they deserve. These are truly privateer mercenaries acting as public servants, but self-interested, lining in their own pockets at the expense of other Americans' lives, who they will loot, plunder, rob, rape, pillage, and steal by any means possible.
Well, and that's just it. I remember that movie, too. I remember him talking about the bleeding and the screams. What I'm seeing across this nation is I'm seeing more people are so fearful. They know. It's sort of like you can be standing on a train track, and you don't see the train coming. You don't see the smokestack. But you can sort of, in fact, you can't even hear it at first, but you feel the tracks. You feel the vibration of the tracks. So you know there's a train coming because the tracks are vibrating, all right? And then all of a sudden, you hear the train in the distance, but you're not really sure if it's coming from the left or right. You don't realize it's barreling down on you. And I think so many people in this nation, it's interesting that, that all of a sudden the government fixed it in such a way, economically and socially, where both parents had to go to work. And that was bad enough because there were so many kids that ended up becoming latchkey children, all right, that would come home and there'd be no parent at home. And we found a lot more kids were getting into trouble because of this. Well, then all of a sudden, then the dad maybe has to work 2 jobs, or the dad has to work a long job, and the mother has to work 2 part-time jobs.
Or there's no dad in the picture.
Or there's no dad in the picture, which is commonly, or there's grandparents and great-grandparents raising their grandchildren. So our entire society is shredding. The fabric is shredding. And the government is using this to come in and say, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, my mother just came to me the other day, and she was telling me some things that were happening in the media. And then another family member came to me and reported to me that, Maggie Rose, well, guess what? It's because of the Republican Congress. The Republican Congress and the Senate, which, outweigh the Democrats, they're going to pass this bill. And this bill is going to take away the free breakfast and the free lunches from many children across this nation. And, where I'm sitting here yelling that we become a socialist government, and then I'm told, yes, well, it's that socialist government, Maggie Rose, that's now taking away the free lunches and the free breakfasts for children. So, somewhere along here, something has to give. I would say there's too many children going to school every day who don't get breakfast and don't get lunch because their parents can't afford to even buy them peanut butter and jam and bread. They're lucky if they get 1 meal a day. Some kids go home at night with absolutely no dinner waiting for them. So maybe their reduced lunch or reduced breakfast or their free breakfast and lunch is the only meal of the day they have. I think that's the one place we should not cut back. But I think we should be cutting back on all these BLM and these huge government agencies working towards getting their 30-year retirement and, out there wanting to have these plush white-collar jobs where all they do in their white-collar jobs is push us around and steal from the very hard work that we've produced. That's where I think we need to start cutting back, is the federal government and the state government's gotten too big, and there's no checks and balances, and there's not enough oversight to keep these people in check and keep them honest. And, the attitude that Valerie said is, what do they care? Everybody is doing it. That's exactly the mentality that most of the people have nowadays. And as Bonnie said, their hearts have been hardened. That's what Donna was saying. But, the attitude, well, who cares? Everybody else is doing it. I might as well get my piece of the pie. What do we do in a case like that, Donna?
We keep trying to help them see the problem with that thinking. So the more we keep talking, the more we keep educating, the more we keep praying to be just one more person who says that, because it typically takes multiple different people to convince the blind to open their eyes.
Right.
And so we have to just keep pushing that knowledge out there. They're ignorant. But I'm going to digress just a little bit. I have a really hard time believing anybody in America is going hungry. because there are so many social programs to feed the people. The only ones going hungry are those who are not on welfare, who are trying to stay away from that trap, who are trying to make it on their own and just eliminate the welfare entitlement mentality with their children. I think it's a bad precedent to set, to start, even with small children, to expect somebody else outside their parents to provide for them. That type of continual hand-to-mouth feeding from cradle to grave creates dependence, and they never get off of it. It just cycles. So, though I feel bad that there are some who will not get breakfast, lunch, or dinner, it's got to be on their parents' shoulders. It's got to be on the household that brought them into the world. Otherwise, you just create another generation of dependence that cannot function outside the feeding trough. And there's becoming less and less of those of us who are actually working to pull the wagon of those who are not working but are taking the resources. Anyway, sorry, I know that that's probably cold, but the reality, even God did not feed Adam and Eve when he turned them out of the Garden of Eden. They had to find their bread by the sweat of their brow. That principle should move forward through all generations of time. You don't get the luxury of somebody else feeding you without a catch. There's always a catch. If somebody is feeding you, it won't be for your own best interest. It's to enslave you. So learning to take pride in your own work, feeding yourself, feeding your family, taking pride in that. And yes, the government has been for decades working a slow and methodical evil upon us with taxation to make it harder and harder for parents to provide for their families. And, we've let this happen.
Well, the rich keep getting richer. Theocrat in the chat room said that's the problem when you have no absolute objective standards for morality, okay? And, murdering innocents, it seems to them they can sleep at night. Somebody else said, I think Theocrat also said, that, that the murderers, the Nazis, the Maoists, how, and you even said, Donna, how can the Nazis look themselves in the mirror or sleep at night? Chris, do you have one more comment before we take another call?
Well, the last thing I would say, and I will leave it with you, is whenever you take the king's bread, you owe the king's duty. That's called the
right.
nexus, or he who accepts the benefit owes the obligation. Thank you so very much, ladies, and thank you, Donna, for your help today, too. Be blessed.
Chris, and thank you so much for being there. And I'm enjoying all the emails that you're sending me. I've been taking a lot of your emails and sending them on to other people whose email addresses you may not have. And people have been feeding me a lot of information that they're really enjoying the research that you're doing. So please, Chris, keep up the good work. It's not going unnoticed.
God bless America.
God bless you, Chris. So Chris is just outstanding, Donna. He's, I think we might have a couple other callers out there, but he has been doing research continuously. He listens on many different radio shows. He takes in a lot of information. It's not just the micro effect that he listens to. We have another listener. Does somebody else call?
Yes.
My name is
Is there anybody else?
Hello? Yes, hello. My name is Shane. I'm calling you from the Silicon Valley.
Oh, from where?
Silicon Valley, California.
Oh, down near San Jose. Yeah, you're only about an hour and a half south of me. Welcome. What is your name?
My name is Shane.
Hi, Shane.
I would just like to report that Chris from Good Side.
Okay. Do you have a question for Donna or a comment you want to make?
Yes, I would like to make a comment, and that is, if anyone knows, we are under we're under merchant law, okay? As the United States citizens, we have been placed into this merchant law since Theodore Roosevelt back in March 9th, 1933. Therefore, we need to get out of this merchant law where we have merchant constitution and therefore go back to the original constitution and apply to a passport application and rebut the system.
Okay, so how would you recommend that Donna or myself, that we put out to people in our communities how we can do that? What is your first name again?
My name is Shane.
Shane. Okay, so Shane, how would you recommend that Donna and myself and other listeners out there can be able to get us out of what has happened in 1933 and bring us back on track again?
Yes, we can go to the post office, pick up a single or double or whatever, however many you want, passport application, ask for a DS-11 passport application, therefore take it home, fill it out, and therefore go to, I believe, Roger Sales' book. It's called From Sovereign to Serf.
Okay.
And apply a affidavit to your passport. There's also for black people and also for white people.
Well, why does there have to be a difference between black people and white people, Shane?
That was part of the constitutional. I mean, part of the I guess genre of the day back in 1933.
Yeah, but the thing is now black people and white people should be equal. So why can't black people go to the post office, pick up an application for a passport, go home and pick up that book from serf to what do you call it? From serf to sovereign, right?
Yes, from sovereign to serf.
From unsovereign to serf. Okay. So why can't the black people and white people we should be able to use the same application and do the same application, don't you agree? There's equality in this country now, don't you agree?
I believe that, yes, all that stuff.
Okay. So what, do you know who the author of that book is?
Yes. His name is Roger Sales.
Okay. Roger Bales?
No, Roger Sales. Sales is spelled S-A-Y-L-E-S.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for calling in. We're coming to the end of the show now, Shane. Maybe we'll take your call again another time. Thank you so much for sharing that information. And that's a good first step for people to take, Shane, in order to get back their freedoms. Donna, do you have a last comment before we come to the end of the show?
Yes, become a U.S. national.
No, I'm good.
Okay. So Roger used to be a host here, right?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for your information. I do appreciate it. I hope we can talk to you again in the future. Donna, I'd like to be able to have you come back next week again if that's possible. I think we agreed on Wednesdays, right?
Wednesday'd be fine.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your input, Donna. I really appreciate you coming on, and we'll be doing a ladies' chat again next Wednesday. Have you come up with a name for our Wednesday session yet?
No.
Okay.
Nothing's hit my brain yet, but we'll come up with something.
We'll come up with something. Okay, well, I appreciate Shane's call, and Donna, thank you very much, and you have a wonderful weekend, Donna. Thank you again for coming on.
You betcha. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.